Hello, my friends. Welcome back. Today, we're going on a journey into one of the most fascinating stories ever told, a story of ambition, courage, and the extraordinary rise of a young man who changed the course of history. Imagine standing on a rocky shoreline as the early morning sun slowly rises over the Mediterranean Sea. Gentle waves crash against the cliffs, and a cool breeze carries the scent of salt through the air. Everything feels peaceful. But on this quiet island, history is about to begin. On August 15, 1769, a baby boy was born on the island of Corsica. His name was Napoleon Bonaparte. No one could have imagined that this child would one day lead massive armies, rule an empire, and become one of the most famous military leaders the world has ever known. Napoleon's family was respected, but they were far from wealthy. Life was simple, and every opportunity had to be earned through hard work. His father believed education could open doors, while his mother taught her children discipline, courage, and perseverance. Those lessons stayed with Napoleon for the rest of his life. Unlike many children his age, Napoleon wasn't interested in wasting time. He was curious about the world. He loved reading books about history, ancient civilizations, and legendary commanders. Every page he turned filled his imagination with bigger dreams. As the years passed, one thing became clear. This young boy wanted more than a quiet life on a small island. When Napoleon was only 9 years old, his family made a difficult decision. He would leave Corsica and travel to mainland France to attend a military academy. For a child, it was an enormous change. He had to leave behind his home, his family, and everything that felt familiar. When he arrived in France, life was not easy. His classmates noticed his Corsican accent. They laughed at the way he spoke. Some treated him as though he didn't belong. Many children would have become discouraged. Napoleon chose a different path. Instead of arguing, he buried himself in his studies. He spent long hours reading, solving mathematics problems, and learning military strategy. While others were playing, Napoleon was preparing himself for a future that only he could imagine. Day after day, month after month, his confidence quietly grew. He discovered that knowledge could become a weapon just as powerful as any sword. His teachers began to recognize something unusual. Napoleon wasn't simply intelligent. He had incredible determination. He never wanted to be average. He wanted to become someone history would remember. At the age of 16, Napoleon graduated from military school and received his commission as a young artillery officer in the French army. It was only the beginning. Beyond the academy walls, France was changing rapidly. The country faced growing economic problems. Ordinary people struggled to survive while many wealthy nobles continued living lives of comfort and luxury. Across towns and cities, frustration was spreading. No one realized that an explosion of change was only a few years away. For Napoleon, the timing would change everything. The young officer who had once been mocked for his accent was about to step into a nation on the edge of revolution. And when history opened its door, Napoleon was ready to walk through it. But no one, not even Napoleon himself, could imagine how far that journey would take him. That is where the next chapter begins. The year was 1789. France was no longer the peaceful kingdom it had once appeared to be. The streets were filled with anger. Bread was expensive, jobs were scarce, and thousands of ordinary families struggled just to survive. People believed the system was unfair, and they wanted change. Soon, that frustration exploded into what history now calls the French Revolution. The old government began to collapse. Kings and nobles who had once seemed untouchable suddenly found themselves facing a furious nation. Across France, everything was changing. For many people, it was a time of fear. For Napoleon, it became a time of opportunity. As a young artillery officer, he understood that success in battle required more than courage. It required careful planning, quick decisions, and the ability to stay calm while everyone else was losing control. Those qualities quickly earned him respect. In 1793, Napoleon was given an important assignment during the siege of Toulon. The city had been captured by forces loyal to the monarchy and supported by the British Navy. If France lost Toulon, the revolution itself could be placed in serious danger. Napoleon studied the battlefield with incredible attention to detail. Instead of attacking without a plan, he carefully positioned his artillery where it could strike the enemy's strongest defenses. When the attack finally began, his strategy worked almost perfectly. The enemy was forced to retreat, and the city was returned to French control. Almost overnight, people across the country began talking about the young officer from Corsica. He was only 24 years old, yet his leadership had already changed the course of an important battle. Soon afterward, Napoleon was promoted to brigadier general. It was an extraordinary achievement for someone so young, but promotions did not change his personality. He continued studying history, geography, politics, and military tactics. He believed that every battle could teach a lesson. Every victory revealed new possibilities. Every mistake carried an important warning. Napoleon understood something many leaders never realize. Preparation often wins a battle long before the first soldier steps onto the field. As the revolution continued, France faced enemies on nearly every side. Several European kingdoms feared that revolutionary ideas would spread across their own borders. They formed powerful alliances and prepared for war. France needed talented commanders. Napoleon was ready. In 1796, he was placed in command of the army of Italy. Many people doubted him. Some officers believed he was too young. Others thought his soldiers were too weak, too hungry, and too poorly equipped to defeat experienced. Winning battles was no longer enough. He believed France could become become stronger than ever before. And deep inside, another dream had begun to take shape. He no longer wanted to serve history. He wanted to lead it. That dream would soon carry him toward power unlike anything France had seen in generations. By the end of the 1790s, Napoleon Bonaparte had become one of the most recognized men in France. His victories had brought hope to a nation that had spent years living through uncertainty and conflict. Newspapers praised his leadership, soldiers admired his courage, and ordinary citizens began to believe that he was the leader France desperately needed. But Napoleon believed his greatest challenge was still ahead. France remained politically unstable. Governments rose and fell with alarming speed. Corruption, confusion, and fear had become part of everyday life. Napoleon watched everything carefully. He believed that a strong nation needed more than military victories. It needed order, it needed stability, and above all, it needed leadership. In 1799, Napoleon returned to France after his military campaign in Egypt. The country was still struggling. Many political leaders had lost the confidence of the people. Seeing an opportunity, Napoleon joined a group of powerful allies who planned to replace the failing government. The plan moved quickly. Within days, the old government had fallen. A new system was created, and Napoleon became the first consul of France, the most powerful political position in the country. For many citizens, this marked the beginning of a new chapter. Napoleon immediately began introducing major reforms. He improved the nation's financial system. He supported public education. He encouraged the construction of roads, bridges, and public buildings. He believed that a successful nation depended not only on military strength, but also on strong institutions that served its people. One of his most lasting achievements was the creation of the Napoleonic Code. This new legal system established clear laws that treated many citizens more equally before the law, protected property rights, and influenced legal systems in many countries for generations. Even today, historians recognize the Napoleonic Code as one of his greatest legacies. As France became stronger, Napoleon's popularity continued to grow. People admired his confidence. They admired his ability to make difficult decisions, and they admired the stability he had brought after years of revolution. Then came one of the most unforgettable moments in European history. On December 2nd, 1804, leaders, diplomats, military officers, and honored guests gathered inside the magnificent Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. The ceremony was unlike anything Europe had seen in centuries. Napoleon was about to become Emperor of the French. As the crown was presented, something remarkable happened. Instead of allowing someone else to place the crown upon his head, Napoleon lifted it with his own hands. Then, before the entire audience, he crowned himself. The message was unmistakable. His authority would come from his own achievements, not from tradition, not from inheritance, and not from anyone else's permission. It was a moment filled with confidence, symbolism, and controversy. Some people admired his boldness, others believed it revealed dangerous ambition. Regardless of opinion, one fact was undeniable. Napoleon had transformed himself from the son of a modest Corsican family into the ruler of one of Europe's most powerful nations. His empire continued to expand. French influence spread across much of Europe. Every new victory strengthened his reputation as one of history's greatest military commanders. But success often brings new challenges. The larger the empire became, the more enemies it created. Power attracted admiration. It also attracted resistance. Several European nations began forming new alliances. They knew defeating Napoleon individually would be nearly impossible. Together, however, they believed they might finally stop him. Napoleon welcomed the challenge. He had overcome obstacles his entire life. He believed intelligence, preparation, and determination could overcome any enemy. For a while, he seemed unstoppable. But history has a way of reminding every great leader that no victory lasts forever. Far to the east lay a vast land unlike anything Napoleon had ever faced. Its enormous distances, harsh climate, and determined people would soon test not only his army, but his confidence as well. The greatest challenge of his life was waiting, and it was called Russia. By 1812, Napoleon stood at the height of his power. Much of Europe was under his influence, and many believed no army could defeat him. His victories had become legendary, and his name inspired both admiration and fear across the continent. But even the greatest leaders can make decisions that change everything. Napoleon believed that defeating Russia would secure his empire once and for all. Confident in his experience, he assembled the largest army Europe had ever seen. More than 600,000 soldiers marched east, expecting another great victory. At first, everything seemed to go according to plan, but the Russian army refused to fight a major battle. Instead, they retreated deeper into their own country, destroying food supplies, burning villages, and leaving nothing behind for Napoleon's army. With every mile they advanced, the French soldiers became weaker. Food became scarce. Horses collapsed from exhaustion. Supplies disappeared. Still, Napoleon continued forward. Finally, his army reached Moscow. But the city was almost empty. Soon after, fires spread across the city, destroying buildings and leaving little shelter for the exhausted soldiers. Then came winter. Temperatures dropped far below freezing. Snow covered the roads. The freezing wind became more dangerous than any enemy on the battlefield. Thousands of soldiers died from hunger, disease, and the brutal cold. Napoleon had no choice. He ordered his army to retreat. The journey home became one of the greatest military disasters in history. Only a small portion of the army returned. The campaign had shattered the strength of the French Empire. Sensing weakness, several European nations united against Napoleon. One by one, his victories turned into defeats. In 1814, enemy forces entered Paris. Napoleon was forced to give up his throne. He was exiled to the small Mediterranean island of Elba. For many people, it seemed his remarkable story had finally come to an end. But Napoleon had one more surprise. Less than a year later, he escaped from Elba and returned to France. As he traveled across the country, thousands of soldiers who had been sent to arrest him instead joined his side. For one incredible moment, it seemed as though history had given him a second chance. This dramatic return became known as the 100 Days. But destiny had written a different ending. On June 18, 1815, near the small village of Waterloo in present-day Belgium, Napoleon faced the combined armies led by the Duke of Wellington and his allies. The battle lasted for hours. Every decision mattered. Every minute changed the future of Europe. By evening, Napoleon's army was defeated. This time, there would be no comeback. He was sent to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic Ocean, thousands of miles away from the land he had once ruled. There, far from the battlefields that had made him famous, Napoleon spent the final years of his life reflecting on his extraordinary journey. On May 5, 1821, Napoleon Bonaparte died at the age of 51. His empire was gone. His armies had disappeared, but his influence did not end. His military strategies are still studied in academies around the world. His legal reforms shaped the laws of many nations. His life remains one of history's most remarkable examples of ambition, leadership, success, and failure. Napoleon's story reminds us that determination can lift an ordinary person to extraordinary heights, but it also teaches us that ambition without limits can carry even the greatest leader too far. History does not remember Napoleon because he was perfect. It remembers him because he dared to dream beyond the limits of his time, and because his victories, his mistakes, and his legacy changed the world forever. Thank you for joining me on this journey through history. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves learning about the people who shaped our world. Until next time, take care of yourselves, keep asking questions, and never stop learning.